Hello and welcome to Frontrunner Motorsport, and it's been a fair while since I've made a video, and I'm hoping to sort of get back into my stride and make 3 or 4 this week. That's the plan. But I thought for this first one, considering the one I was doing isn't ready yet, we'll talk about Formula E, because we haven't talked about that for a while. And there's only 4 races left in the championship. In fact, the Formula E series will be over pretty much a month from now, I think. I think it ends on like the 14th of August, something like that. So we've got 2 double headers in London and Seoul in South Korea. And it's not like last year where we headed into the final weekend and pretty much the whole field could win the championship. It's a little more strung out this year. And the main challengers would be your series leader Stoffel Vandoorne, Mitch Evans, Eduardo Mortara and Jean-Eric Vergne. Now you also have Antonio Felix da Costa and someone else, Robin Frijns. They're still in it, but they're kind of a bit further back. They need things to go their way. After that, I think Lucas de Grassi is in 6th, and I think he's like 73 points off Vandoorne. Not impossible in Formula E, but it's a big stretch. So really you want to focus on that top 4. Now, they had very contrasting weekends in America, and honestly, between them, it has been sort of going back and forth all season. But what I will say about Formula E is they have the ability to have a great race in America, where Formula 1 just doesn't. Compare this to the Miami Grand Prix, these 2 races in Brooklyn, where the second race was a more straightforward race. The first one, it was a really good race and it ended in absolute chaos and red flags, which was actually kind of disappointing because I think it was starting to hot up a little bit. But Formula E, for some reason, I guess maybe it's because every race is a street circuit and they just know how to do it. It's sort of like a level of expertise that's been gained. Because actually, if you go back to early Formula E, not all the tracks are great, and I think there's definitely a learning process for them. Formula 1, you'd think with like 70 years worth of history, they'd be able to do it better, but they actually can't. This Brooklyn track is a lot better than the Miami track, and considering it's in New York City, you'd think Formula 1 would just use, if not the same circuit, something similar. I don't think it would work for Formula 1. I think it'd be a bit too narrow, but it could be modified to make it work for Formula 1. It's a lot more interesting than the Miami Grand Prix. That's the main takeaway. As for the races themselves, Nick Cassidy took his first ever Formula E win, which is something I'm very happy for. I've sort of been waiting for him to win a race for a long time. I really thought he'd come in and just hit the ground running and start doing really well. It's been a bit more of a struggle. He hasn't really scored many points this year. He's had the odd points finish here and there, but this was the first time where he was on pole and he took the win. I think he's had something like 4 poles this year, and I think he had a couple last year as well. So he's had plenty of chances, and it's finally come together. And he's taken his win, although in kind of controversial fashion, because the rain started coming down, and Cassidy, along with everyone else at the front, did crash. In fact, I think Frijns was the first one to get through and not crash, and he was in like 5th or 6th. Everyone else aquaplaned into the barrier. Massive damage to Cassidy's car, especially, because unfortunately he was the first, so everyone else just catapulted straight into him, and that ended in red flags. That ended the race. It was probably for the best for people like Stoffel Vandoorne, who are starting to look like they were starting to struggle in the race, and if it had carried on, they may have dropped back further. So this was probably the best result for them. That shook up the championship because Vandoorne, I can't remember if he was 2nd or 4th. I think he was 2nd in the second race. He was 4th, I think. But I think that did give him back the championship lead at that point. Second race, we got a win for Antonio Felix da Costa, which is his first since Monaco last year. And it was a more straightforward race. It was still very entertaining. Mitch Evans battled through from about 8th to 3rd. And we saw a couple of instances of him and Nick de Vries did it twice, where they went over to one side of the track, hit a bump and nearly spun out. Very exciting stuff in this series, as always, just chaos and carnage, and it's very hard to keep track of who's where, and honestly the championship is constantly changing, which keeps Formula E very, very exciting. But the end result of this weekend was Stoffel Vandoorne did very well, 2 decent points finishes. Mitch Evans, he got 1 decent points finish. Mortara finished in the points in both races but didn't score. I think he finished 9th and 10th, so he only got a few points. Jean-Eric Vergne had a terrible weekend and ended up with nothing. But it is still pretty close between these 4 drivers. I think the gap is only 26 points, so just over a race win. And even as I said, Frines is driving very well at the moment. Antonio Felix da Costa seems to have picked up the pace a little bit too late. They're only 20 or so points off Vergne, but obviously that makes it about 40 or 50 behind Vandoorne. But in Formula E, if things happen, say Vandoorne, Mitch Evans don't finish next couple of races, or Mortara as well, they could close that gap as well, and we could have a very interesting finale between 6 drivers. The way I see it, I think it will be between the top 4 at the moment. Vergne did not need this bad weekend. I think the momentum was on his side coming into this race, and with Vergne, you have a seasoned race winner, a 2-time Formula E champion. He knows how to get things done. It would be disappointing for him to have not scored in either race, especially as his teammate took the win in the second one, so the car was clearly capable of it. Mitch Evans, we saw some great battling from. I think I said a couple of years ago that he was going to be champion. He's one of those drivers where I guess it would be that he flatters to deceive. He can drive very, very well, but it doesn't always seem to go his way. And he's closed in a championship fight this year, and I think another couple of good drives is going to keep him up there. But both races he was back in the pack at some point, and he needs to be starting races nearer the front of the field and staying there, obviously. Same goes for Vandoorne. He's very hot or cold. He's been better this year, as opposed to his teammate Nick De Vries, who has dropped off a cliff. Honestly, the more I see De Vries linked with Formula 1, the worse he drives. He was a great driver last year, and last year was crazy, but it made De Vries look like a champion. This year, De Vries has been very, very average at best. Even taking a couple of wins, he hasn't really looked that great. I think he's done 7th or 8th in the championship. He's quite a long way off. Again, it's not impossible for him to win the championship, but it's going to take a miracle. And don't see it happening for him. So that means Mercedes' focus will be on Vandoorne, which is good. I think each of these teams, with the exception of maybe Techeetah, where you could argue Felix da Costa could be in the title fight, the other 3 teams, Evans, Sam Bird's having an awful year, and he was my pick for champion for some reason. The only guy on the grid to have won a race every single season of Formula E does not look like doing it this year, because he has been so average. This was one of his better races this weekend, but not a good year for Sam Bird. And that means he's there to help Mitch Evans. Lucas Di Grassi's not having a spectacular year either. In fact, at some point in this race, we had Buemi and Di Grassi 2nd and 3rd. I think it was in the first race. Think back to the last time that happened. You're talking 3 or 4 seasons ago. Both those drivers, who were the top of the top in Formula E, are basically nowhere now. Di Grassi you see near the front, and he's a midfield driver. Buemi you normally see at the back of the field. But that does mean that Di Grassi can help Mortara, De Vries can help Vandoorne. Vergne, I think Da Costa will realise that he's maybe not in the title fight, so he does have his teammate backing him up. Or he can back his teammate up, So it's a fairly fair contest between the top 4 drivers. And that is really, really exciting. So who's my pick? I'm going to go for Mitch Evans. I think this could be his year. Vandoorne had 2 very good races in America, so he's due to have 2 very bad races in London. Vergne maybe will have... you expect Vergne to have a good race eventually, so I would expect him to bounce back in London. Mortara, I've been amazed for the last 2 years. For some reason, it's always just a surprise that Mortara's there. He finished 2nd in the championship last year. He's up there again this year. Don't know what to expect from him. So Formula E, 4 races left, carnage guaranteed, and another exciting end to the championship. So let me know who you think will be the champion of Formula E in 2022. Who do you think the main contenders are going to be going into the last 4 races? Leave your thoughts about Formula E in the comments below. Remember to subscribe to the channel. Thank you for watching. I'll be back with more very shortly. Have a good one.